Welcome back to another episode of the Less is More Sports Podcast, the college offseason podcast, where you could say we're less of the regular season, but more of the offseason. With the conclusion of the 2023-2024 college football season, Matt and I are going to revisit the predictions that we made at the beginning of the beginning of the college football season. You know, we made a lot of predictions that became true, a lot of predictions that maybe didn't come true. But, I was trying to think of a better way to start this episode. But I feel like this is going to be really corny because normally we would start with the first topic that we talked about in the cap or no cap episode. But I think we have to address the elephant in the room, talking about Nick Saban retiring, which still was fitting because one of the narratives on our cap or no cap episode was, is the Alabama dynasty done? So overall, we're going to kick it off a little different, not necessarily maybe with that narrative, but we're going to talk about this absolute shockwave to everyone except us here at Less is More Sports and talk about one of the great coaches in college football history officially hanging it up. So, Matt, overall, just addressing his retirement and what were your overall thoughts on that?
Before I get to that, I would like to say that my plan for this podcast was I was going to rewrite We Didn't Start the Fire, but it was going to be about the 2023 college football season. And I got as far as Michael Penix, Liberty, USC has no D, and then Les told me to stop. He didn't like that idea. Can you believe that, folks?
He did no such thing. I take no blame for that.
I just came up with that on the top of my head, and I'm very pleased with myself. So
you should be. That was very creative. I got to give it to you.
But yeah, as for the Nick Saban thing, I don't think there's ever been a week in January in any type of sport, any genre of the American sport, I can't speak internationally, that felt so weirdly seismic between what happened with Nick Saban, what happened with Bill Belichick, what happened with Pete Carroll, everybody like that. It just felt like, I was teasing about the Josh McCown and Chad Pennington kids playing in that Frisco Bowl. This really does make you feel old because it feels like you're watching the end of an era. You have the last 14 playoff, the last gasp of the Pac-12, the last gasp of probably one of the greatest, if not the greatest coach to ever do college football, especially in the modern era. It just feels seismic. I don't really think there's any way you can put it all into a unique perspective. Because, the one thing you can always say about Nick Saban is that he wins. It doesn't matter if it's Toledo, Michigan State, well, except the Miami Dolphins. But that's a story for another time. And
he wins at the college level. He wins at the
college level everywhere. And just watch finally some guy and to have all the think pieces about, it's because of NIL. Oh, it's because of the transfer portal. Oh, it's because of the new expanded SEC. And it's just like, the man is 72 years old. The man has seen countless football games. Let's just let him go. All great things must come to an end. But this is like, if it hadn't have been for that very weird ending to the Michigan game, I think we'd even be more sentimental about it because it would be like the perfect way to ride off into the sunset. But there's nothing really else that hasn't already been said other than it just feels like you're watching, combined with everything else that's been going on in the sports world. You're just watching the end of an era. It's just done. The BCS as we knew it, the college football playoff as we knew it, those eras are over. And it feels like, it's dust in the wind. Put on your Kansas records, everyone playing at home, get sentimental and stare out the window at the winter sky for a minute. Because it's just like you're getting old. Things are changing. The world around you, the things you took for granted, the dynasty you thought that would always be there lingering in the background has finally reached the end of an era and maybe even for a while won't be as relevant. And it's just really weird to think about.
More than anything that Nick Saban accomplished, one of the things that stands out the most to me about his coaching tenure was the speech that he made about giving players second chances. And I don't know if you've seen the speech, but he sends a really good message because at the end of the day, despite how much publicity these guys get at such a young age, they're still kids at the end of the day. I mean, if you go back, I'm not going to tell you how many years. I don't want to quite give away my age here, but you go back to like an 18, 19-year-old Les, and if I think of if I was judged for everything that I did at that age, you people wouldn't look at me the same. And that's the unfortunate reality that we have like in the college football world is that these kids or these young men rather, I don't want to disrespect anybody, they don't necessarily get that second chance with, the general public. And I think Nick Saban really sent a good message there because he was able to give several of his players a second chance, and they took full advantage of that. I remember the story he told the story about Musa Muhammad, who you and I watched growing up as an NFL receiver. He was getting in trouble at Michigan State, and then Nick Saban gave him a second chance. Well, now he goes on to play 15 years in the NFL. Now runs his own business, has 7 kids, and apparently all of them are also doing well as well. One's going to Princeton apparently, and good for him. And like Nick Saban said in the speech, who was obviously right here? Look, when you're that age, you're still learning about how the world works. You're still learning what you can and what you can't do, what works, what doesn't work. And to be judged, have your whole life judged at something you do at that young of an age is completely unfair. And it's the unfortunate reality that college athletes live in. So more than anything that Nick Saban accomplished, it was that speech that really stood out to me. And I've always gained a lot of respect for him because of that speech. And yeah, I mean, we're definitely saying goodbye to one of the greats that have ever coached, and much much respect to him. Enjoy a happy retirement. I do want to say I do feel like Matt was punching air with that Reggie Bush comment, though. That's what your response definitely reminded me of.
Really?
I feel like you were punching air when Reggie Bush was talking about how NIL forced Nick Saban to retire.
Yeah, that was one of the things that was like, oh no, here come the takes.
Well, I guess when your last season as a professional running back, you end with negative rushing yards. I mean, you got to find some way to stay relevant, I guess.
They need to give his Heisman back.
They do. No, I 100% agree with that. And even Johnny Manziel agrees with that.
And if Johnny Manziel says it, you know it's true.
I don't know if I'd go that far, but
I mean, the man got away with making up being the son of Texas oil barons, so I'll give him credit for anything.
Which that was an awesome cover story. I'm not even gonna lie. And of course, the Johnny Manziel documentary was absolute gold. That's one of my favorite sports documentaries in recent memory. I mean, just the way him and his buddy were able to run that side business and make all this money and go completely undetected because they just had this great cover story was just amazing. Megan putting the money Manziel symbol to a whole new level.
And he didn't take it too far. He didn't claim like that oil baron uncle was Jed Clampett or anything. So everyone's like, wait a minute. That's got to be Beverly Hillbillies.
And what was crazy is everybody was believing it too. Like even Colin Cowherd was talking about it on the Herd and everything. It was executed just goldenly, bro.
It really was. That may be one of the greatest finesses of all time. But yeah, speaking of people who finessed here, Les, moving on with the Nick Saban thing, I don't know how we're gonna do this, but let's just give a shout out to all the agents of all the coaches who were rumored to be in line for that Alabama job. So Mike Norvell's agent, Steve Sarkisian's agent, Dan Lanning's agent. Congratulations, you all just got like I don't know, not a Christmas bonus, but a New Year's bonus by
they secured the bag. They secured the bag.
That bag. Welcome to the Finesse Hall of Fame, all of you. You're all welcome members. I'm so proud of you for what you've done because my phone was just like, oh, extension. It's just like, yep, I figured this would happen, but my goodness, the money being thrown around for these coaches to stay put now is just, it's almost as impressive as anything I've seen getting a big coach to come in.
Well, that's what you got to do to compete. If you want somebody to stick around, you got to throw them the bag.
That's all I wanted to say there. Just give everybody a little bit of a shout out there to all those agents who kept their guys at their same schools. Even if Dan Lanning's video was just a little corny, just a little.
Where this ties into the cap or no cap is during the cap or no cap segment, the question was asked, is the Alabama dynasty done? And
And
I
my
just want to
quote,
point out that I was technically correct because I said Nick Saban would not win another national title as the head coach of Alabama. Well, he officially can't anymore because he's not the coach anymore. And his last season as the coach, they lost in the semifinal game of the college football playoff. So I do want to point out that I was right. But where this ties into the show with Nick Saban retiring, of course, this means that that a lot of players are going to start entering the transfer portal. And you got Shadur Sanders already reaching out on Twitter. We're trying to recruit these Bama players. Like, you saw the tweet, Alabama players tap in. And of course, as a Texas fan, I got to talk about the Keelan Robinson one, where he's like after the game, he's running over to the Alabama recruits saying, "All y'all come to Texas," and that's which is my logic I want to have. And of course, as you probably saw before we got on the show, Isaiah Bond transferred to Texas. So it's already starting. But what kind of shakeup is this going to create with all these Alabama players potentially transferring?
well, you're talking about the Alabama players. The shakeup I'm thinking about is Washington.
Well, yeah, we're going to get to that because obviously, we'll just go ahead and dive right into it. As you all have seen, Kalen DeBoer, former Washington head coach, is named the successor at Alabama. And Matt, continue with what you were saying.
I would just like to congratulate Washington Husky legend Will Rogers. You want to talk about finesse? Pulled off one of the greatest jobs of all time, warming up on the sideline, and then proceed. Well, I mean, he didn't know it was coming, but then proceeded to duck out to the point where now he's probably the Alabama starting quarterback. But I digress. The guy I really feel sorry for from the Alabama standpoint in all this, and I had to say the reason why I had to talk about Washington first is because it didn't make sense without it. Is I feel bad for Jalen Milroe.
Mm-hmm.
Get maligned all year. People talk about how terrible you are, and then you overcome you let the naysayers know, as the thing says, his necklace I believe says, and you get all the way to the national semifinal game, and you play the best team, which was proven in the country, as about as well as you can for 4 quarters, and go to overtime. And then on fourth down, you just have a little bit of an errant snap that you somehow manage to corral. And after you've been getting your ass sacked all day, it happens again, and you try to be a hero, and it just ends up right in the face. You just got to feel for that kid. He's had a roller coaster ride of a season, but they went back to him, they ditched him. Nick Saban poured a lot into that kid. Nick Saban's gone now, and the dude you comes in to replace the guy who trusted in you just so happened to have the best quarterback in the transfer portal already committed to his team that he's leaving to come to your team, and he's probably going to bring that guy with him. And I just feel bad for him because, what happens if Will Rogers does go to Alabama? They're not going to want, even though he won the SEC, they're not going to want Jalen Milroe. They're going to want the number one guy in the transfer portal. And Kalen DeBoer is probably going to want the guy he recruited. And I just feel bad for how do you do this if you're Jalen Milroe? I just feel bad for him because I know he's going to improve and he's going to go somewhere and be great. But that's just a roller coaster ride of a year I wouldn't wish on anybody. Going from benched to the starter to ending the Georgia unbeaten streak to just that to playing Michigan tough, even though your offensive line's playing like dog water for most of the game. And then that snap where everyone's scrutinizing your decision making, and now it's like, well, I did enough, and it's like, oh wait, am I even the starter next year? I just feel bad for that guy.
I'm going to be completely honest. I have a couple things to say with what you said. Number one, I want to say this on record right now. I do not think Will Rogers is the best quarterback in the transfer portal. I think that is Dylan Gabriel, but I digress. Not the point. Not the point you were going for. I completely understand. Yeah. Number two, me personally, I would start Jalen Milroe over Will Rogers. That's just my personal opinion.
Right.
Another place I'm going to go with this. Wow, I just almost lost my train of thought there. Oh, if you all saw it on one of the YouTube shorts I did on the YouTube channel, is that I actually defended that play call for Alabama because if you watch the Michigan game, Alabama's offense got going in the second half when Jalen Milroe was able to make some plays with his legs. So with the game on the line, I definitely defend the fact that Tommy Rees wanted to put the ball in the hands of the player that opened up their offense in the second half. So I do want to say that as well. But my last point I want to make about the DeBoer hire, at least for the time being, is DeBoer is already going to do at Alabama what Nick Saban could never do. Because if you remember last year, before they settled for Tommy Rees as the offensive coordinator, Nick Saban reached out to Ryan Grubb. Well, with Kalen DeBoer coming in, Grubb's going to follow him from Washington more than likely. So the offensive coordinator that Nick Saban wanted to end his tenure with, Kalen's going to be able to come in and bring him, year one. And this also reminds me, and I don't know if you'll like this analogy or not, but just given all the history, dating back to his days at Sioux Falls, Kalen DeBoer reminds me of like the Adam Sandler of college football coaches. As if you watch all the Adam Sandler movies, he's got like the same group of guys in every movie. So he brings his whole crew with him everywhere he goes. And that's kind of like what Kalen DeBoer does, because he brings pretty much all the old Sioux Fall guys with him to every coaching stint. And I assume that they're all going to come with him to Alabama. And I think that's going to be an underrated aspect of this hiring more than anything, because all those guys, I think, have a future in not only just college football coaching, but college football head coaching as well. And all those guys are proven, winners, proven they get the best out of each player. And I think it's just going to be a good move overall.
Right, and I agree with you there. And one of the big criticisms that I've seen about this hire, and I've got to admit to an extent, when I first heard about this, your mind has a tendency to shoot for the stars, if you will. Because, this is Alabama. This is the premier program in college football. And it's like the DeBoer can sometimes seem a little underwhelming. It's kind of like when it looked like that Texas A&M was going to hire Stoops. It's kind of just like, that's the move. That's the move. It's not Sarkisian. It's not pulling a guy out of the NFL. It's not going out and like throwing a bag at like Jim Harbaugh. Or, Harbaugh's not going to leave, obviously, but somebody who's like that. And one of the big criticisms I see of that move, the DeBoer move, is the fact that the guy does look like he's playing NCAA Dynasty with the way he's like been moving up the ranks, from Sioux Falls to the offensive coordinator with Indiana to the head coach at Fresno State to the head coach at Washington and now the head coach at Alabama. He stays for about 2 years, and that's about how long he stays. And the thing people keep commenting is, well, that's just winning with another guy's players. And I think that's the point. In today's modern NCAA, where you've got the portal, you've got the NIL, and more importantly now with the portal's 2-time transfer thing being up in the air because of Congress and all that stuff, that's one of the keys to winning is you go out and you get other guys' players. And winning with other people's players is how titles are won now, or it's going to probably be part of a big part of why. And so I don't understand why you would think that's a bad thing, because that's going to become such an integral part of the game moving forward. Is you've got to take other guys as players, and maybe get them to that next level. Maybe encourage them to build their brand. You've got to get other guys. I mean, Michael Penix Jr. had a breakout season in 2020 at Indiana. He beat Penn State in overtime on that last second thing. He was another guy's player who comes to Washington, has 2 really, really good years where he gets all the hype in the world, runner up for the Heisman. And I mean, if he would have stayed in Indiana, he probably still would have had hype, but he brought it to another level if he wasn't hurt all the time. But that's a story for another day. So, I mean, when people talk about that stuff, I mean, winning with another guy's players is what you have to do now in a way. You have to go out. I mean, Isaiah Bond. I mean, you don't think Steve Sarkisian's like, oh, no thanks, Isaiah. I've got guys that I've worked on, and they're my players, and you're another guy's player. So you just stay down there in Alabama, and I'll take this freshman from Plano I'm bringing in. No, it's not. That was a made-up player, by the way.
Right.
I don't know if there are any freshmen in Plano, Texas, and I'm sorry if there are. But the point being, like, I think I get why it seems underwhelming because, DeBoer springs on the scene out of nowhere kind of from Washington over these last couple of years. And you're expecting somebody like you said, like almost like a Pete Carroll caliber name to come in, as your other segment said.
Which I'm going to defend that take here in a minute, but continue.
That's fine. I'm just saying that's who they expect to get is like a Pete Carroll. Hell, I even saw people who wanted Bill Belichick to come down there.
I did see that rumor.
Who wanted Bill Belichick down there. And it's like you get Kalen DeBoer, who's just coming off getting kind of, not trounced, but soundly defeated, let's just say, by Michigan in that championship. And I think that's an okay criticism. But saying that a guy winning with other people's players isn't a good way to build. It's like, well, that may have been true long ago, but we're in a new era now. We're in a new era of expanded opportunities for players and teams, and sometimes you just got to go with the flow.
Yeah, get with the times, Boomer. And I think that was an absolutely phenomenal point. And one of the big reasons why I could never even get behind that logic is okay, whether it's with another guy's players or not. I mean, look, at the end of the day, he took Washington to the national championship game, lost or not. He got him there in his second season with the team. That's impressive enough. Then you look at his head coaching record overall, more impressive. And the bigger point about all this is all those other guys that Alabama fans might have thought, were bigger name hires. Look at his record against them. And that's all I'm going to say about that. I love Sark, but DeBoer's 2-0 against him. Dan Lanning, phenomenal coach. He's got a good record against him too. No, he's undefeated against him too. Sorry, I worded that wrong. And, before we close out, because we do have other topics we get to, and we spent a lot of time on this, is I do want to defend the Pete Carroll to Alabama take that I made on the YouTube shorts. If you haven't seen it, go check it out. And I do want to clarify on that is because I never thought that with thinking that move, I never thought that was going to be a long-term option because Pete Carroll is around the same age as Nick Saban. What I was thinking, the thought process behind that was that, look, it's going to be tough for Kalen DeBoer or whoever they would have hired to come in and replace an absolute legend. So what I was thinking is maybe bring in somebody for a couple years who is a legend in his own right to maybe take that pain off of the next young coach that they're eventually going to want to bring in and develop a long-term tenure with. If that helps anybody, if that helps any viewers at all.
Yeah, that's what, because when I first saw you posted that, I was very much like, oh, that's kind of a weird take. And then the more I thought about it, I was like, yeah, because like I said, you're following the greatest coach in the BCS and probably the playoff era. One of the greatest, if not the greatest coaches of all time, at one of the biggest, if not the biggest program of all time, where winning is paramount. And my God, and let me tell you, Alabama fans aren't going to settle for winning 8 games and playing in the Gator Bowl or the Sugar Bowl every year.
No.
So when I thought about that, it's like maybe they should wait a little bit longer, bring in an older guy, or hell, even bring in Bill O'Brien. It didn't even have to be Pete Carroll. Somebody weird with like a lot of experience to be like the old man punching bag during like a transitional period when you're trying to find like the next great young coach. But I don't know if it's to their credit or to their detriment. They did not do that. And I'm very interested to see how it's going to work out. But like I said, I really feel bad for all the Washington fans right now because your recruiting class has diminished. All your players are going. Penix, McMillan, Roma Dunze, Polk, they're all in the NFL draft and they're going to be stars on Sunday. And to reward yourself with that, you've lost your head coach, your offensive coordinator, all your players, and you're joining the Big Ten next year.
Mm-hmm. Ouch.
And it's just like, oh gosh, it's pain by 1,000 cuts. And not
the conference that just beat you in the national championship game.
And how good Oregon even looks now, a few weeks later, than what they did the last time you beat them. It's like, oh no. The funniest part was like Roma Dunze popping up in like an Oregon fan Twitter space and telling them to behave or he was going to come back.
That's awesome.
Made me laugh. But yeah, I just feel bad for Washington and all this. We're talking about how like, ooh, this is a risky move for Alabama. It's like, what do you do if you're Washington?
Right.
Who's going to take that job? I mean, it is in the Big Ten, but it's also in the Big Ten, and you've got a pretty depleted roster. So I'm going to be interested to see, and we'll cover it sometime whenever it happens, who Washington brings in to try to right ship during a very tumultuous time because, oof, it may be rough that first year in the Big Ten.
Let's get some fan interaction going. Vote in the comment section below, or I'll run a Twitter poll after the podcast is who is going to be the next Washington head coach. So let's get the fans involved with that one. But only time will tell how all this is going to unfold eventually. But we got about 10 minutes left because we flew through that Nick Saban segment. But we're going to go down the line. We're probably just going to give a short statement. We're going to touch on all the other cap or no cap narratives that we talked about, starting with that Georgia would make it a three-peat. Matt, you said that was no cap. I said that was cap. But of course, my dumbass picked USC, and we all see how that worked out. So any thoughts on that, or do you want to move on to the next one?
I blame Alex Grinch for everything.
Yep, we blame Alex Grinch for everything. Anyways, the next narrative, of course, and Matt, you let me dominate. You said no cap to this one, and you let me dominate this segment. But is Texas back? And I'd say 12-2, made the college football playoff, won the Big 12 in their last year in the conference, beat Alabama, did all the things I said they would do. Plus, people are starting to notice that the culture that Sark is building, I think that kind of speaks for itself. Moving on to the next segment we talked about, the ACC is Florida State's to lose. Both you and I no capped it. Matt, I feel like you might want to go somewhere with this one.
Well, I mean, we were right. I mean, there's nothing else to be said. We had some debate about whether Clemson was going to be good. For a while. It looked like they were going to be awful. And then that hero from Spartanburg called and made Dabo Sweeney angry, and the rest was history. And like I said, I was surprisingly high on Louisville before the season just because of their easy schedule. They proved me right, and then then they kind of ended with a whimper, but still proved me right. I had them at 8 wins. They won more than that. So, sometimes you win a few.
And, I said that Duke would be Florida State's biggest threat, and that prediction was looking really good until the Riley Leonard injuries. Yeah. And now, of course, Riley Leonard will be playing for Notre Dame now. And Duke is now under a new era in Manny Diaz. So funny how things change in such a short time. The next narrative, the Big Ten is Michigan's or Ohio State's to lose. Both of us no cap this. Obviously, Michigan won the conference like you and I both expected them to do. And they not only won the conference, they won the national championship. So I think that prediction looked pretty good. I added that Wisconsin could pose a threat. And then I looked stupid. So
yeah, you never know what's going to happen.
Yep. I think that wraps up everything we have to say. This next one is where Matt and I disagreed. And that is Colorado will make a bowl game. Matt, you said cap. I said no cap. And then I looked really stupid. Matt, overall thoughts on the first year of the Deion Sanders era in Boulder?
I mean, we knew it was going to be a fun watch, but we also knew it was going to be difficult because you bring in all those transfers. Yes, they're incredibly talented. Yes, it's your son and Travis Hunter. Travis Hunter gets hurt. You start with a relatively soft schedule and then build your way into probably the toughest and final Pac-12 we've ever seen. There's going to be disappointment along the way, and sometimes disappointments just outweigh the athleticism and the hype. But the groundwork's laid. Deion, after that initial group of transfers, looked back and saw, oh crap, I have no offensive line. My son is getting killed, and has since amended that. And now you're moving to the Big 12, which, it seems a little bit more like there could be 5-ish, 6-ish wins hiding in that conference, rather than playing a very tough Pac-12 schedule. Now, I'm not going to lie to the people. I haven't looked at the 2024 Colorado football schedule, but it's probably not. It's probably not. It's probably not going to involve playing USC, Oregon, Washington State, all those teams who had really good NFL caliber quarterbacks last season. So I'm going to say it's probably going to be a little bit easier for them, especially now that they have the offensive line, which I thought was a dumb prediction, thinking they were going to go out and get 5 offensive linemen, and they proved me wrong. But the groundwork's been laid. First seasons are always tough, especially when you have that much attention, that much hype, and the spotlight is clearly burning your corneas if you're Deion Sanders. But yeah, it's there. The foundation's there. They're going to continue to get better. And then the question is going to become, does he stay?
Like you said, the foundation is laid, and I still believe. And if you believe anything you see on social media, it's going to be a very interesting year next year if indeed Colorado does indeed become the Colorado Crimson Tide. I don't know if you've seen that narrative at all.
Colorado Tide. I like
the Colorado Tide. Hey, that's hard. I'm not gonna lie, that's kind of hard. But no, it's gonna be very interesting to see how Colorado goes going forward. Again, I'm still a firm believer. Travis Hunter and Shedeur Sanders have all the talent in the world. Of course, as we know that as you've alluded to, that they've completely re-upped their offensive line through the portal. And yeah, it's going to be interesting. So it's going to be fun to follow them. We talked about a couple other things on the podcast, but it's nothing that really me and you as fans can really notice from an outsider's perspective. We talked about, NIL ruining college football, which I think we all both agree that's not happening. It's making it better in a lot of ways. And of course, we talked about, will conference realignments the following season affect teams' performances this year? I think we could assume it does, but do we really know? Yeah. Not really, because we're not there talking to the players currently. I do think, from a Texas perspective, their last year in the Big 12 is what motivated them to go out of the Big 12 on top. So I'll say it affected them in that regard. But other than that, it's stuff you and me as fans can't really tell from the outside perspective.
Oh, I think that those kids in Stillwater were highly motivated to beat Oklahoma that day, just to stick it to them one more time before it's like, oh, hey, you're leaving, goodbye. Here's a loss for you, and you're not going to the championship game. Whatever.
And then they go to the championship game, get absolutely dog walked by my horns. But that's neither here nor there.
They made the playoff. There's levels to it. Let's just say.
Exactly. But that wraps up all the narratives we talked about on the cap or no cap season. And like I said, we officially have come to another end of another great college football season. Matt, do you have any closing thoughts on the football season we just witnessed?
Other than the fact, like I said at the beginning of the show, there's just such a weird sense of finality with like this going to the 12-team playoff. The fact that the college football playoffs won't end until like the 20th of January next year. The fact that we've lost an entire conference. The fact that, Nick Saban isn't in Alabama anymore. This season is just the end of an era for a lot of guys our age, especially, who watched football growing up. SEC on CBS, Nick Saban versus Les Miles every week or whatever, and now it's over. The BCS playoffs, Fiesta Bowls, stuff like that. It's over. We're entering uncharted territory now. What will a 12-team playoff look like? What will these new conferences be like? Will they be competitive? Will they be dominated by the old guard? Will some kind of new guard arise from it all? What does Florida State do? Do we have only 3 conferences when we do this show next year? We're in uncharted territory in ways that we can't imagine right now. And if you would have told me that this is where we'd be sitting, we're not even sure at the moment if Michigan is still going to be a national champion next year. They could, I don't think they will, and I don't want them to. But, there's always the talk of rescinding a title for, improper benefits. And even though those really don't exist anymore, you never can tell. I mean, it was the end. It just feels like the end of something almost like childhood in a way. You grow up with a certain way of doing things, and now there's games on Peacock. There's games on all kinds of streaming services. The coaches are different. There's movement. The BCS, the playoff, they're all gone. It's the end of an era, and now we're staring into the strange new future of 12 teams and NIL, and who knows what we're going to find. But you have to be cautiously optimistic. The game of college football has existed since the 1800s. The college football has existed since the 1800s in the United States, and you just have to, think about it, keep moving forward, and hope for excitement wherever it goes.
I'm definitely one to always, be excited about the future, because even though I do have much respect for the greats, and, as you said, we're having almost a really shift of power with all the retirings and the firings going on. But, college football is in good hands. As always, there's going to be talented players no matter where you look. And, this new batch of coaches, Kirby Smart, Dan Lanning, Steve Sarkisian, Kalen DeBoer. They're leaving college football in good hands right now. And it's going to continue to be, as always, entertaining to the fans. And to touch on what you said about Michigan, if the NCAA does try to rescind their title, that's just such an anticlimactic way to end their season because they faced adversity all year long. And I think in a lot of ways that rallied them to push towards a national champion. And just to have that potentially taken away is just the biggest slap in the face in the world. I think they did. I think there was a report that Michigan did win the national title fair and square, according to NCAA officials. That's the latest I've heard on that. But of course, do they take that back and decide something else? Later, who knows? But Michigan deserved it. Like I said, a year full of adversity. They powered through the end to finally win that coveted national championship that they've been seeking for so long. They've seemed like they've just been knocking on the door the last several years, and they finally opened it. So hats off to them. But yeah, I mean, another great college football season in the books. And, just from the little of the offseason we've seen so far, which is what we talk about on this podcast, it's already got me excited for next year. Ohio State right now is looking scary good. Texas, I mean, what we've been doing is amazing. I'm excited about the next tenure of the Duke football team. And, there's the question marks. How's DeBoer going to look at Alabama? Is Georgia going to rebound next year? Dylan Gabriel, he's going to replace Bo Nix in Oregon. And, I'm a Dylan Gabriel advocate myself. I mean, he's a great quarterback. I mean, there's so many moving pieces, so much parity in college football now. And I just think it's an absolutely beautiful thing.
Dylan Gabriel advocate.
I am. He's a great quarterback.
You're going to have to put that in your Twitter bio or something, like Dylan Gabriel's advocate.
And I think Bean is sad that the season's over because now he's making his first appearance of the podcast with his little sweater.
He's all shivering cold thinking about how boring it's going to be until it comes back.
We still got college basketball, buddy. But hold on, Matt, but not to cut you off. We got less than a minute before we got to get out of here. So as always, like and subscribe to Less is More Sports YouTube and Spotify channel. Be sure to follow our social media pages on Facebook, Twitter, and Threads. That's at Less is More Sports for the latest update on new content coming soon. And congratulations to another great college football season in the books. And we look forward to now transitioning to the basketball scene. Matt doesn't look as excited.
I do not. I never look excited. What are you talking about?
You're right.
I have to watch Big Ten basketball less.
Got it. Okay, I wouldn't be excited about that either.
Thank you.
Well, you don't have to watch Big Ten basketball. You could always jump to the Duke bandwagon.
No.
Yes.